I'll always remember a pastoral conversation that I had once with a member of a congregation that I previously served. This man, I'll call him Carl, was a serious athlete in senior track and field competitions. He was in his late 70s. And when I say he was serious, I mean that he held several national records for his age group in the long jump and the triple jump. And he traveled around the US and Canada and occasionally overseas to compete and to connect with his community. He confided to me, however, that when he talked about his pursuits in the congregation, not to brag, but simply to share his passion, he was met with indifference at best, and sometimes with a kind of condescending sneer. You do that? Why would he want to pursue such a thing? If he'd been passionate about bird watching or classical music or 19th century British literature, he said his interest would have been embraced. But sports? Not so much. We're beyond that. Here's the painful truth. I understood exactly what he meant in that particular congregational culture. The elitism was such that sports was considered beneath us. Kind of in the same way that country music in that same congregation was considered, oh my God, we don't do that. But if Unitarian Universalists want to be taken seriously in the wider culture, we have to understand that culture. To be willfully ignorant or disdainful of sports is no different than being willfully ignorant or dismissive of any cultural expression, such as music or art or literature. If religion is, as the theologian Paul Tillich said, simply the depth dimension of culture, any cultural form or expression at its depth has a religious or spiritual significance. So what is that depth dimension in sport? In 1938, the Dutch anthropologist and historian Johan Huizinga published a classic work called Homo Ludens, a study of the play element of culture. The word ludens is Latin, and it means play. It's where we get our word prelude or postlude or interlude. It's played in the middle. Or for that matter, ludicrous. Ludens, homo ludens. For Huizinga, play is the essence of what makes us human. It is all human culture, according to his perspective, arises from play. One might say, for example, that the city of La Crosse was founded on play, on sports. I guess, as I've heard, due to the fact the rising and receding of the waters of the Mississippi, the low prairie grasses, or in the low-lying prairie along the river here, right here, was an ideal meeting place for indigenous nations to come together and play what in Ojibwe is called Baga'adowewin lacrosse, as it was called by the Europeans. The game of lacrosse, says one indigenous teacher, was given to our people by the Creator to play for his amusement, just as a parent will gain much amusement at the sight of watching a child playing joyfully with a new gift. So it was intended that the Creator be similarly amused by viewing his children playing lacrosse in a manner which was so defiant of fatigue. This is our belief. And when the four great messengers came, the Creator reiterated to us that this game should be played, and played here, among other places. According to Huizinga, play is what we would call a free. It's essentially free. It's a free activity, which stands outside of ordinary life as being somehow not serious, but at the same time absorbing the players intensely and utterly. Huizinga says it's connected to no material interest and no profit can be gained by it. We might look at that with respect to the Super Bowl, for example, but true play, in Huizinga's sense, proceeds within its own established boundaries of time and space according to fixed rules and in an orderly manner. It's a world of itself in that way, and it generates other cultural expressions. So if religion is the depth dimension of culture, it's not an exaggeration to speak of play as sacred, and sports partake of that sacred quality, or they can, I should say. To be sure, there's much to be criticized in what I like to call the athletic industrial complex. There are distortions, the commercialization, the militarization of professional sports, layers and layers of cultural expression that may not be true to that initial playful spirit of free play. But it's our job, I think, to look beneath those distortion and see that at its core, athletic competition is a universal human activity that cultivates and expresses many positive virtues and values. That's why I call this sermon Good Sports. The ethical problems are there, of course, in the form of sexism, racism, commercial exploitation, and so forth. But those evils are not unique to sports. They are societal ills, and sports is a microcosm of the larger society. Those problems, as well as those possibilities, are intensified and focused and amplified and magnified in sports, but they're not caused by the sports. They are distortions of something positive. Athletics reflect the values of the surrounding culture in microcosm, for better and for worse. Sports, in that sense, Shoup uses the term apocalypse. And by that, she means, in this technical sense, the true sense of the word apocalypse. It's not about some kind of catastrophic cosmic termination of existence. The word apocalypse means revealing or unveiling. And she's trying to say, what do sports reveal about who we are? That's the meaning of apocalypse. Forget the catastrophe. What is unveiled? What is the ancient Greek goddess Calypso was known for her extraordinary beauty, but she also had long hair that covered her face. Calypso means hidden. Apo, away from. When she drew her hair aside, she revealed the beauty of her face. Apocalypso, apocalypse. So this is a little bit of an aside, but when we talk about the apocalyptic character of sports, when Shoup does, she's saying, what does it unveil, uncover about ourselves when we're playing or witnessing an athletic contest? The Duke of Wellington supposedly said that the Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton. In other words, the character and discipline that was formed by athletic competition proved to be the decisive factor in the victory over Napoleon. Now, Eton was one of those English public schools. That's really a misnomer. Public schools in England are actually elite, private, exclusive private schools. But in that culture of the public schools, team sports were seen not just as outdoor play or recreation, but as a systematic way of teaching English boys the discipline, the skills, the codes of honor, and the leadership qualities, including an instinctive respect for the importance of hierarchy, that helped them build and administer the British Empire. Now, my point is not that empire was or is a good thing, or even that the values instilled on the playing fields of Eton were in fact decisive at the Battle of Waterloo. My point is simply that athletic competition does instill and reflect a set of values, and we need to pay attention to what those values are. So I want to reflect on a few of the positive values that I find reflected in sports. Over the years, I've served 2 congregations in Indiana, one in Indianapolis, just a few blocks away from the iconic Hinkle Fieldhouse. I wish I had a picture here where the final scenes of the classic sports movie Hoosier were filmed. It's a grand old building. And then a congregation in Bloomington where the main campus of the Indiana University is located. And during my time in Indiana, I came to understand that basketball is to the Hoosier State what hockey is to Minnesota. It's an absolute passion. And I have to say that while I was there, it was a little bit contagious. I became a bit of a basketball fan. I had to. When I was interviewing for the position in Bloomington, a member of the search committee picked me up at the Indianapolis airport and drove me down to the church, which is located on the edge of the IU campus. And as we approached town, he said, "I'll take you to see the church later, but first I want to show you the real religious center in town, the true temple." And we pulled up into the parking lot of Assembly Hall where the Hoosiers basketball team played. We parked and went inside. It was dark and silent and empty. So we stood on the mezzanine, looking down on the dimly lit court. I felt a certain quality of hushed reverence. There's no other way to describe it. It was a kind of sacred architecture, not unlike the great cathedrals of ages past. A few summers ago, Diane and I found ourselves in Green Bay one Tuesday afternoon in August. We were on our way to Door County, but I wanted to show her Lambeau Field. She's a much bigger sports fan than I am even. But there were thousands of people there on a Tuesday afternoon in this festive atmosphere. And it turned out that the Packers were having an open practice session, not in the stadium, not in Lambeau, but a few blocks away. So we followed the crowds and watched through an iron fence. I tried to take a little video until a security guard came over and politely told me that that wasn't allowed. I guess they thought we were Viking spies. But as the players left, some of you may have seen this, they engaged in a lovely little civic ritual. Dozens of children were there waiting outside with their bicycles. And as a player came by, they would say, "Choose me, choose me." He would get on the bike and ride it with the child following, maybe a block or two toward the locker room. And these enormous 300-pound linemen would get on a little pink bicycle, and I don't know how it was done. It was more impressive than the game, to see that. But to the delight of the children and, of course, their parents in the crowd. I described that experience in an email to my friend and former high school teammate in football and baseball, Jim Sullivan, who unfortunately died just a few years ago, just recently. He was a sports writer for many years for the Waterloo, Iowa newspaper, and he confirmed that sports have this community building power, even at the lower levels. He wrote in an email, "I've seen this phenomenon time and again in my 36 years of covering high school sports. Nothing brings a community together like a run to the state tournament, and a championship brings positive feelings to the whole community that may be pushed in the background with the passage of time, but are never completely forgotten." And Sully knew whereof he spoke. He was a member of the Two Harbors high school basketball team that went to the state tournament in 1971. So sports can help to build community among the players and the fans. Part of the culture building, community forming power of sports is that athletic competition generates stories. Here again, Sully wrote, "We all love a good story, preferably one with a happy ending, and that love has been a part of human history for countless centuries." Man after my own heart, talking about the power of stories. He said, "What produces better and more dramatic stories than sports? Think of the Miracle on Ice Team USA's hockey victory over the Soviet Union, how it touched the entire country. Even if you didn't know the difference between a slap shot and buckshot, the story had it all: the underdog, the villain, the unexpected twist brought about by the outcome, and an ending that Americans loved then and now." My story that I will indulge, the captain of that team was Buzzy Schneider from Babbitt, Minnesota. And we played Babbitt the last home game of my senior year. We won 2-0, and Buzzy Schneider, the captain-to-be of the U.S. Olympic team, came in all alone on me, and I stopped him. I'll treasure that memory to the rest of my life. He went on to the Olympic team. I went on to ministry. But we all have stories like this. In an interview with a music journalist a few years ago, the great singer-songwriter Paul Simon confessed that one of the peak experiences of his life, in fact, the biggest, was when he scored the winning run by stealing home in the bottom of the 11th inning of a high school baseball game when he was 16 years old. I believe I peaked at that moment, he told the interviewer. I truly believe that was it. And I don't think I've done anything greater since. I honestly believe that. I never came quite that high, achieved that high again in my life. All the fame, all the fortune, all the Grammy Awards paled in comparison to the thrill of that moment, that boy's baseball memory. That's pretty powerful stuff. I mean, is there something special about sports that seems to generate such deep and lasting psychic imprints in the form of stories? Another former parishioner of mine, a man named Dave Stinson, used to play basketball for University of Kansas, which, as you may know, has a top-notch basketball program. But when I knew him, Dave had Parkinson's disease, an affliction from which he eventually died. But he told me a particularly poignant story about how he was invited back to Lawrence for a team reunion when he had severe mobility issues due to his Parkinson's. And sorry. But he talked about how he was cared for by his teammates who knew that he would probably not be able to make it to another reunion. So that brings me to the second value, is that of teamwork. My friend Sully again wrote that an athlete can learn the value of teamwork, of people bonding together for a common good. There comes a time when one must set aside personal interests for the good of the group or the team. Sports can offer example after example of how this produces success on the field for the individuals who make that sacrifice. Teamwork. I love to see it here, and I see a lot of it here. Shoup, in her book, describes, for spectators as well as participants, sports allow us the free expression of emotion. True fans are not spectators in any sense. They get into the game, work at it, play hard, even as the players on the field. And think of the excited exclamations of the television broadcasters. Remember Marv Albert's, "Yes!" as a basketball swished through the net, or Harry Carey's, "Holy cow!" Or as my own father used to say, "Woo!" You don't hear that kind of thing too much in church. I mean, can I get an amen? Yeah, right. That spirit is affirmed and celebrated in sports. I want to say something about sports and families, because sports can be a language that families share. I know one of my treasured childhood memories is simply playing catch in the backyard with my dad before supper. And he would lob the ball up in the sky, gauging how difficult it might be for me to catch it. And he'd yell out, 2 bits, if it was what meant if I caught it, he'd give me a quarter. 2 bits. If I dropped him, I owed him a quarter. And somehow it always worked out that by the time our mom called in for dinner, I might owe him a quarter or he might owe me 50 cents, but it wasn't about that. It was about the play, the beautiful arching balls in the air. Diane's family was far more fanatic about sports. Her grandfather was an avid Boston Red Sox fan, but he never got a chance to see them win the World Series. He died before they finally won in 2004, and that year Diane went to Boston in the freezing November rain to the victory parade, took his picture out and said, "This one's for you." So sports can be a shared language with a family, not to replace all other healthy dynamics and activities that a family might share, but this is one that often does hold a family together in a certain way, a certain shared interest. Finally, Shoup in her book makes the point in her reading that sports are a manifestation and a celebration of a fully embodied grace. Embodied. I have this theory that all athletes want to be dancers deep down. That all sports, in the end, tend toward their ultimate fulfillment and expression as dance. When you watch Serena Williams stretch high to hit a serve, or marvel at the goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury making an acrobatic save in the net, or LeBron James executing a perfect alley-oop, or see Davante Adams reaching up to catch a pass with one outstretched arm, tiptoeing down the sideline, or you watch a perfectly executed double play in baseball, what you're really seeing is dance. It's a movement, grace for its own sake. Whatever shape our body is in, we can experience vicarious pleasure through the witnessing of these acts. What is present in athletic competition that is not so evident in dance is the contest, what in the ancient Greeks called the agon, where we get our word agony or antagonist. Agon is a contest. It's part of what makes us human, is that ability to discover ourselves in the agon, in the contest with others, with ourselves. Some of you may remember the slogan of that old television show, The Wide World of Sports, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. But there's agony even in victory and in the contest itself, the striving, the struggle. And this is something that, of course, in life as well, outside of sports, that ability to hold ourselves to sacrifice, as Sully said, in the conflict, in the contest, in the agon. Good sports are those that lift us up, show us to ourselves in our full humanity. Sports at its best, when it reaches this spirit of what I call the spirit of dance, it really transcends the idea of winning and losing. It's beyond that. There is this element of sheer, deep, creative play. And that is what I mean by good sports. At the end of his conversation with Tom Goldman on NPR, following the death of the ebullient personality and Hall of Fame baseball player Ernie Banks, Chicago Cubs, when he died, the NPR reporter Scott Simon choked up as he said, "We follow sports because it elevates us. It makes us feel the joy in life. So should religion, my friends. So should religion elevate us and allow us to feel the joy in life."